people should be found early in life. The people who would not attend formal schools and therefore would need informal training or vocational training, a space should be made available for them to do that. And then we have the need for health centers. We're asking that the women in our communities, we have traditional midwives who attend to women during delivery, as it's always very difficult for them to access health centers or hospitals. We're asking that they provide, in collaboration with either the private sector and government, provide centers where these women can practice to save women from untimely death. And then the reward system should be all-inclusive and have the capacity to forestall any kind of corruption. And then building a Niger Delta tourism city. Invest in the town so that the town and the gown can meet, especially for the creative industry. We serve as the third largest in the world, and then as we're using STEM for education for the creative industry, we can also use STREAM, which is science, technology, engineering, managing, and designs, so that we can meet global requirements. And then we should also carry out a labor market analysis to increase enrollment. Deliberately, we're asking that our education includes education in technology and in AI. And when foreign scholarships are given, they should not only focus on science, they should also focus on the creative industry and tech science. Thank you very much.
The rapporteurs, they will need your paper. Thank you very much. That is group 2. For every group, once you are done with presentation, you send your paper to the rapporteurs, and then at the end of the 7 groups, we will have Q&A so that you can engage any of the groups. Group 2, please. Group 2. Group 2, please be around in case of question and answer. Okay, please. Thank you very much.
For group 1, I beg your pardon, economic development of the region. I'd like to invite the representative of group 1, Prince Iwefa Aganaba. You have 5 minutes to do your presentation. Please, Prince Iwefa Aganaba, 5 minutes, please.
All right, thank you very much. I'll go straight to the presentation. We'll be talking on economic development. So we discussed extensively on ways we could help impact and cause a change in the region. Some of the things we talked about were the needs for an enabling environment to be established in the region to attract investment, creating necessary platforms to do that. We talked about considering ways of increasing funding for the NDDC, which was a great impact by. We also talked about efforts that should be made to eradicate poverty through agriculture, such as rice farming, should be considered, and not just considered, it should be followed through. We also talked about the comparative advantages of some states, some locations, significantly in various crop production. They should be considered. Crops that have high yield potentials in states should be raised to be adopted for these states. We shouldn't take productions or crops to states that naturally do not have the environment to produce. We talked about power and electricity to enable this economic growth. We talked about extending the value chain of agriculture from cultivating to the needs of the people. We also talked about identifying and producing a sustainable blueprint policy on agriculture to drive economic growth in the region. We talked about establishment of an industry hub to sustain economic growth in the region. We also talked about establishment of institutional frameworks to drive agriculture in the region and ensure that projects are implemented on a needs basis. We talked about taking advantage of the coastal areas of the region by exploring investment in fish farming and production. We talked about infrastructure management and maintenance, of course, to create an agro-mark institution and agri-tech. NDDC should set up a delegation to identify the cash crops plantation that have been abandoned over time and consider ways of reviving these infrastructures and developing them. We also talked about establishment of integrated fishing production and also need for digital literacy in the region to ensure economic growth. Various entrepreneurship development centers in the universities we have in the region should liaise with the NDDC with a view to deepening the entrepreneurship of the Commission. And finally, factories should be built to produce byproducts of our crude. We are blessed with enormous oil reserves and crude in the region. There are over 6,000 byproducts. So the group is strongly advising that we should have factories that will produce these products. Thank you. Thank you very much, and God bless you.
You give your presentation to the please, this event is called the technical session. It is a pre-event that will feed into event of Friday. But without these breakout sessions, nothing will be technical about it. So can we keep the room a bit quiet? There are too many people who are moving around the room. Let's take our seats, please.
We'll now take Group 3. Group 3 is presenting on infrastructure development. And to do the presentation, I'd like to invite Dr. Akin Ikudaisi.
Yeah, thank you very much. Group 3's presentation was on infrastructure development, and we are happy to have the MD who joined us in that group as well. Infrastructure development is an enabler of economic growth in any country. It improves connectivity, it integrates the region. And when we talk about infrastructure development, we are talking about roads, railways, airports, and seaports. But we have some big issues on infrastructure development. One has to do with funds. How do you create road from Age to Yenagoa? How do you do the road from Brass to connect to Port Harcourt? How do you connect the coastal region to the main community? Financing is an issue. But there are opportunities there too. The need to improve tourism that brings about huge revenue for the region. But for that to happen, there has to be roads that connect people and tourists to the places where that can happen. The recommendations on transport is on creation of a Niger Delta Development Bank, in which people can begin to fund the development of railways over a long period of time. We also talked about creating incentives for the private sector to also be able to finance construction of roads, railways, and ports. We also discussed creation of spurs. I mean, the federal government is doing the coastal road now. Can the state or the NDDCs create spurs of roads, bridges that can bring people from those coastal regions into the main area? We talked about power as well. Power is also an enabler for socio-economic development. When we talk about power, we are talking about electricity. But the problem with electricity has to do with the gas supply. One, we have gas flaring, which is happening on a daily basis. On the other side, we have a case in which there is no light. So federal government is currently taxing oil and gas companies, but the fund is not coming back to the region. The fund is going into a central pool. Can we have a case in which the funding from the gas supply goes into a pool that can help to improve power? Another problem has to do with vandalization and theft of cables, transformers, and the infrastructure to drive power. But the recommendations that come in from the power sector is creating off-grid energy solution, which doesn't have to go into the national pool. Another recommendation that come in is for the creation of mini grids. The texture of the region is such that a typical community has less than 5,000 people in it. So creating an environment where any private investor can be able to make profit from such community is very, very minimal. But power is also not free anywhere. So we are looking at creating pilot cases in which there's a willingness and the ability to pay. Also, we talked about creation of industrial clusters that begin to fund power solutions. And then these clusters can then create industries that can pay for the tariff. Finally, we talked about growth hubs and housing. We think we should move away from a system in which the government is providing housing for the people to a case in which they are creating an enabling environment for the private sector to drive the growth of huge housing deficits that we have in the region. Also, we talked about the need to improve the mortgage system so that people who are paid employment can be able to buy their house and then stagger the payment over a 20-25-year period. Thank you very much.
Please, we already have 3 groups: economic development, human capital development, and infrastructural development is the last group. Take your notes, have your questions ready. After the 7th group, you can engage any of the groups in the Q&A session, but let me use this moment to say thank you to all of you for making the room conducive, for being quiet as we continue.
To make a presentation on behalf of Group 4, Environmental Development, may I invite Dr. Giadom Ferdinand. Dr. Giadom Ferdinand.
Standing on the established protocols, good evening, very distinguished ladies and gentlemen, the Royal Highnesses and Majesties that are here. I will present the wrap-ups and takeaways that we did in Group 4, which was centered about environmental development. We had 4 sub-themes ranging from waste management, erosion control and flood management, biodiversity conservation and reforestation, oil pollution and remediation. And then talking about waste management, the central takeaway is that we should establish the waste to wealth philosophy and make that a deliberate policy. And so that NDDC and other private practitioners can integrate, can come together to introduce an integrated waste management plant. In this integrated waste management system, we will have conversion of plastic waste into briquettes and paving stones. And this is making turning waste management into big business. We can also harness liquid wastes into usable forms, such as single-cell proteins that are climate-resilient biofertilizers. And so these wastes that would have, as it were, contaminate our environment will be converted into usable forms that actually will create wealth. Then on erosion control and flood management, number one, we established that the conversion of wetlands into other purposes, like building over wetlands, is what makes flooding increases the magnitude of flooding around the delta. And so there should be deliberate government policy at protecting wetlands as nature reserves, because they have infinite capacities of storing floodwaters. We also said that canals should be established around communities where we have this flood problem, and the canals should be cleared and desilted on regular basis so that during the flood seasons, we can have free flow of floodwaters to their terminal points. Then, most importantly, we discovered that erosion, especially coastal erosion, has become an existential threat for coastal communities in the Niger Delta. A particular case was mentioned where even cemeteries are not spared. Bodies of our departed relatives are being washed away. And so it was agreed that comprehensive holistic shore protection projects and land reclamation should be built around these communities to protecting them from rising sea levels and ocean surge. Community sensitization around coastal erosion and flood management is key. And so the Niger Delta Development Commission has been tasked to take community sensitization and early warning systems directly into communities. We also talked about biodiversity conservation and reforestation. The mangrove is the marker plant of vegetation in the Niger Delta. And we are seeing that excessive logging of mangroves depletes and deforests the Niger Delta. And so there should be deliberate policies at enforcing anti-excessive logging practices. And the enforcement mostly is done on land. But we also discovered that a lot of transporting of these logs happen on water. So policing the waterways to ensure that excessive logging is greatly reduced and almost eradicated should be taken as very serious point. Mangrove restoration. Most of our communities' mangrove areas have been deforested. And so, again, recommendations are that the NDDC should take a good step at beginning to restart or continue projects on mangrove restoration. Then the big elephant in the room is oil spills, oil pollution, and remediation. There is virtually no part of the Niger Delta that is spared of this menace. And oil spills destroy all our biodiversity, destroy our lives and livelihoods. And so it should be taken very seriously. Now, it was also mentioned that the military, in trying to curb the menace of oil theft, when they come to sites where this stolen crude is stored, they simply destroy the reservoirs, which further release spills into the environment. So a suggestion was made that government and entities should make provisions that once they discover stolen crude, there should be reservoirs that these things can be taken and stored, rather than they being destroyed and further aggravate the problem. Again, it was realized that government should try to enforce the provisions of IGASPIN, because we are finding illegal decommissioning, very criminal decommissioning of oil facilities in the Niger Delta. And this very poor practice of illegal and decommissioning of oil facilities actually aggravate the problem of oil pollution in the Delta. And finally, oil spill assessment. That oil spill assessments and remediation projects should cut across the entire Delta so that once oil spills are cleaned up in one community, what comes from the other community does not compromise. So there should be a holistic oil spill assessment and remediation strategies for the Niger Delta. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. You can please submit your presentation or report to the rapporteurs. Thank you. While we're still expecting the presentation from Group 5 and Group 6, I'd like to invite the representative of Group 7 on finance and funding, Chief Professor Jasper F. Jumbo, JP.
Please permit me to rely on existing protocol. Group 7 dealt with finance and funding. We identified some key issues. First and foremost, our facilitator, Reginald Ihebuzo, did a very wonderful job, and I'd like to publicly commend him. 2, NDDC, like most organizations, cannot fully operate without adequate financing. You can't think of developing infrastructure without enough finance. And the NDDC budget, if you track it, is dwindling. And could only come mostly from government. The research shows that Nigeria needs about $10 billion annually for infrastructural development. So if you want to measure it, Niger Delta should need a minimum of $2 billion annually for financing the operations of the NDDC. The NDDC budget or statutory allocation can never sum up to that. We now started looking at the sources of revenue generation, and we use a triangular paradox. The orthodox, the PPP, the private, public, partnership, and we brought another caveat. The introduction of a Niger Delta Development Bank. I'll look at them because they have their pros and cons. We agreed on the need to look at some of these models and alternative means of infrastructure financing. And we agreed that government is a major driver of development worldwide. But that the major development, that development banking is the most important resource organization. And that now that the NDDC budget is dwindling, we must encourage the NDDC, every stakeholder from Niger Delta, whether you're the NDDC board and management, whether you're a minister, whether you're a governor, whether you're a stakeholder, we must persuade our president to help to get other nations to set up a Niger Delta Development Bank. It is not the bank like the former Pan-African Bank we used to have, that some traditional rulers and all this in down. No. This will be an infrastructural development bank owned by nations. And it should be set up by a charter. It's not to be controlled by the CBN. So that other governments can invest in it. And when they invest in it, the decision making becomes a little bit different. It is not something that somebody will stay in Aso Villa and they decide what will go to where and who will collect what. No. The voting and the decision making will be influenced by the number of shares that each of the nations or each of the investors. We looked at some critical stakeholders in this investment portfolio. We looked at the idea of getting the NDDC through the federal government to own about 20% or so. Then each of the 9 Niger Delta states to own about 2%, that's about 18%. We will convince the international oil companies, the IOCs, to own 20 or more percent. Then other countries will own, some percentages as shareholders in this development bank. And that it will have a governing council, not just a board, no. It will have a governing council so that we know that World Bank loans, some as their interest rate as low as 1%. And they could give you a timeline of up to 30 to 50 years. So that NDDC can source major fund from this development bank and use it to look into how to finance and take care and amortize some of the investments they meet in the day-to-day operations of their mission mandate. And that with the coming together of some of these nations, it will require a presidential input. For example, our president picks up the phone, calls the president of Sao Tome, the president of Tunisia, say, look, we're doing this. Why don't you join us? It will go a long way. That is why, starting from the Senate president and our people in the National Assembly, our governors, those who have the links, let everybody reach out. Let it be a major, decision of the critical stakeholders here assembled that we want the president to help in setting up this Niger Delta Development Bank, which other nations will bring funds into. We need to team up to persuade the president to act expeditiously. This is one way to bridge the funding gap. We also looked at the issue, we mentioned the issue within the orthodox parameter. Within the orthodox parameter, we also looked at the issue of resolving as a body that Mr. President, we don't want to know where he gets the money from. They should look at the monies owed the NDDC, which is about 2 trillion, because on a daily basis it's increasing. We want this money paid. And I want the youths also to start mounting pressure. Let the government, if they are borrowing money from IMF or anywhere, they should go and borrow money and bring money into the NDDC. The 2 trillion they are owing, we won't accept it again. They should remove them from the TSA regime. These are some of the things we looked at in the orthodox parameter. And again, that when the funds come, this issue was not fully resolved before our time was up, because I was raising the issue. It's not getting this money and giving to the board and management. But I also want to know how this fund, when it's, that bank, how the average Niger Delta contractor, how the average Niger Delta woman, how the average Niger Delta youth will access this fund at minimal interest rate, and whether NDDC is going to use it to stand guarantee for them to access these funds and execute the project seamlessly in our various resource areas so that they can put them on hold so that as soon as they finish, they pay them so that NDDC does not owe anybody. I am looking at how we want to empower our people. And so my friends don't want me to go that area. Okay, I stopped, I won't go that area. But the issue, we trust this board because they are people-oriented. I said it before, and I like to re-emphasize it. Let us work and help them engage this fund. I have the confidence, and I believe, with my brother Boma as the EDFA, he will not finish all the money, because if he finishes the money, we'll go and wait for him at Eleme Junction and collect part of it. So he will know how to manage it. Please, let all of us, if you have the 3%, yes, we are talking of the 3%. Let me not forget. The interest, that's what they want to hear. The 3% VAT, that it should be made directly payable also. All the VAT collected from Niger Delta, 3% should be paid to NDDC. Meaning that we want something done about the NDDC Act, because they are doing it for the Northeast Development Commission. And what is good for the goose is good for the gander. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. And now to do a presentation on behalf of Group 5, Security, Law and Order, may I invite the representative, Walsin Paminola. Walsin Paminola, please.
Good evening, esteemed guests. I'm standing on the already established protocol. I've been asked to represent and do a presentation on behalf of Group 5, Law, Order, and Security. That was facilitated by a foremost environmentalist, I'll call him so, Barrister Iniro Wills. And these are the issues that were discussed and raised. Law, order, security. What's the big deal about law, order, and security in the Niger Delta? How are we going to deal with the Niger Delta question vis-a-vis the issue of peace and justice? And we looked at just 3 components of justice. For want of time, he could not alight all 4. We talked about economic justice. Under economic justice, we looked at the issue of economic inclusion of the people of the Niger Delta, the issue of resource control, and equitable participation of the Niger Delta people in the oil business or oil sector. We also looked at environmental justice, and finally we touched on access to justice, which affects each and every one of us within the Nigerian space. So, we looked at the baseline of the current security situation and law and order within the region. But for want of time, we didn't expend our energies leaning backwards, talking about the problems that we all know. So we quickly decided to proffer solutions. So, besides looking at what the present condition of things are, what are the gaps in terms of law and security, and then the way forward. These are among the things that were proposed. First, we agreed that the absence of justice is a threat to law and order. The absence of economic and social justice is a threat, potential threat to law and order. We went down memory lane to further accentuate this, that the derivation formula used to be 100% under regional governments, and then it moved down to 50%. It went down to 3% under the IBB regime, 1.5% much more later, and today the question is, are we indeed getting the 13% derivation from the federal government? So the fact that there is economic exclusion has led to joblessness among most of our teeming youths, and that has further pushed them into crime. We have a lot of them who don't want to go into the oil sector. They have delved into Yahoo Plus, and ritual money making. So we postulated that economic empowerment of the people within the region is one sure way to address the issues around law and order and security. We also touched on the environmental degradation of the region, environmental justice, and that we cannot, wonderful postulations have been made here as way forward, but no intervention would thrive in the current environmental condition of the Niger Delta. The environment is degraded. There is serious issues of pollution, and just recent study from community women in Otabagi, somewhere close around the Olebre axis, has shown that the crude oil within the bloodstreams of our women, just a sample of the population, they took women, and that has serious congenital effects on babies that are being born and on the women. Okay, so we looked at economic displacement because of the degradation and spoliation of the Niger Delta environment. A lot of traditional occupation can no longer thrive. So fishes are gone. If you know the saline environment, the marine environment, you can't find certain sensitive species. The musky pie is gone, mullet is gone. Only species that have high resilience, like the tilapia, you can find easily. And if you buy them, if you even go a fishing and catch them, the taste is a little different if you have very sensitive taste buds like mine. Okay, so we also said that federal government intervention agencies like the NDDC should embark on large scale because agriculture is a major employer. So agro-allied industries could be a huge catch for the jobless, teeming young people and our women. We looked at the issue of securitization of the Niger Delta, and our perspective was to deal on the issue of human security, that it should be prioritized as against military interventions. If human security is addressed, there will be less need for boots and guns within the region. Okay, we talked about legal reviews, and very importantly, I want to make a quote. I want apologies to the VC of USC, Prof. He stated clearly, I'm lifting this directly from him, laws has been used as an instrument of oppression on the people of the Niger Delta. very oppressive, very oppressive and emasculating of the people within the region. So we are calling for legal reviews and repeal of certain laws completely to address the gaps and to ensure that there is economic justice for the people within the region. Okay? Laws are also supposed to be people-centric. And so we are saying that the laws are not supposed to be, man was not made for the law, but law is supposed to be made for man. So the laws are supposed to address the needs and the issues of the people of the region and not to be a limiting factor. So the PIA is considered as a great gift to the communities. And the reason is that the Host Com Trust Fund, the way it's presently structured, does not give access to the people, but give complete control. The making of laws, in the making of laws and in the process of decision making, the lawmaking process must be people-centered, people-focused, and address the people's need. We also did some retrospection, and in retrospect, we raised certain questions. The question of proper political representation at all levels, and we queried the fact that at such an auspicious gathering like this, most of our representatives are not here. Those who came in had also gone. They're not ready to feel the pulses of the people they feign to represent. Okay, so we talked about bad governance. We talked about judicious use of resources, accountability, and transparency, okay, of funds that have been remitted to the various arms of government and various intervention agencies. Okay, we talked about using host community people for community policing. Because if you look at the PIA, the burden of security is rested on the host community. So we're saying that with the gains from local surveillance group, if youths are engaged in surveillance contracts, and if youths are also allowed to participate by expanding the economic opportunities for host communities by the oil multinationals, that will address the issue of restiveness and insecurity within the region. More importantly, we said that the local content for community people, 30% for local businesses should be enforced. Okay, we talked about, okay, I can see that my time is up. We looked at the current economic situation as a major trigger. If nothing is done expeditiously within a short time, it will be a trigger for most young people to go back to the creeks and carry arms to express their grievances and discontent. Thank you.
Thank you. Please do well to submit your report to the rapporteurs. Thank you. And we'll be taking the last group for today, the group on governance and institutions, implementation and M&E. And the representative is Professor Odwak Umor.
Thank you very much. Good evening, the MD and others. I'm representing Group 6. We're looking at implementation and other strategies. Under implementation, by implementation, we are looking at the strategies, the Niger Delta region, a regional strategy that are to be put in place in order to have a way forward. And these strategies are broken down into economic development, social development, infrastructure, and others, including governance and institution. Then, like I said, this strategy, when it is implemented, will give direction for the next phase. And the next phase of implementation of the strategy is a joint work program where we go to each state, we look at each of the 23 sectors, we collect baseline information. For instance, if you look at information such as hospital, we look at how many hospitals are there in that local government or in that sector, and we also look at where the hospitals are located, and also look at the capacity, that are available. That's the capacity of a particular hospital. Then, based on that, we have been able to gather some data. Now, the strategy that the NDDC has in mind is to make healthcare universal. So, by so doing, the data we gather, we have to see how we can carry out implementation to have a universal healthcare, affordable and accessible healthcare. So from that data that we have gathered through feasibility study, we have been able to identify some gaps. And then we have to look for a way to close the gap by trying to build more hospitals. And we can also bring in health insurance to enable the masses around there to make good use of the healthcare facilities. And under monitoring and evaluation, we have also seen a strategy, for instance, looking at governance. We saw that monitoring and evaluation should be put in place. And by monitoring and evaluation, we saw that technological infrastructure should be put in place or should be strengthened in order to ensure performance-based contracting. Meaning that with this technological infrastructure in place, there is going to be a kind of a measure that the technology will help to checkmate the quality of work that is being delivered by the contractors. Under governance, we saw that governance system should be put in place using this system to implement whole-based organization. We also need to retain the personal implementation, and this has to do with a merit-based approach to ensure that the governance system, is used to achieve some of the strategies that are put in place. Then under monitoring and evaluation of projects, we saw that monitoring and evaluation of projects is necessary to ensure quality and timely delivery. Now, in the course of looking at that, we saw a critical challenge, and that critical challenge is corruption. And the question is, how many organizations have their political will to provide the much needed technology in order to be able to curb this corruption? So we try to answer the questions by saying that it's important that organizations must invest in technology in order to take care of this challenge of corruption, so as to enable us, the government, the organizations, to achieve its goal, and that goal has to be timely and quality deliverables. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we have We have listened to the 7 groups. Whether you are in the cubicle or you are outside it, if your hands are not busy, can we put our hands together for all of the 7 groups? Thank you very much. Now we are eating a bit into 6. Let's say 5:30. Can we do Q&A for 30 minutes covering the 7 groups? Anywhere you are, if you have questions for any of the groups, they are all seated here. Please indicate, introduce yourself straight to your question or comment, or you think you have idea how they can put some of the issues they have raised. The microphone will move around. I want an usher to please step forward here to collect the microphone. Wherever you are, you can come out of the cubicle now. You can come out of the cubicle and raise your issues. If you have questions, all the facilitators of the 7 groups are still here. All the members are still here. You can take up any one of them. Raise your hands. The microphone will come to you.
Okay, my name is Prince Maibobi Okareme, Pioneer National Secretary of TRUMCON, Traditional Rulers of Oil Mineral Producing Commission of Nigeria. In the report given by Group 3, in discussing the possibility of increasing power, they made mention of having access to the 3% that, the gas flare penalty that the oil companies are currently paying. But that recommendation will be in conflict with Section 104 of the PIA. The essence of the gas flare penalty, as the name implies, it is a penalty. Therefore, as host communities, we don't want that our fund to be used for any other thing other than what was specified in the Act. And what is specified? Section 104 says money received from gas flare penalties by the Commission under this Act shall be for the purpose of environmental remediation and relief of the host communities of the settlers on which the penalties are levied. So the bottom line is that this penalty is strictly for remediation of the negative effect of flare on the host communities and to, if possible, give them some other empowerment programs. So that fund must not be used for any other thing other than what is specified in the Act.
Okay, thank you very much, sir. The facilitator for Group 3, Ate Beredugu, or any member of Group 3, do you have any reaction to what you just said? Any reaction? It's a comment, okay, thank you. Now, do you have any question for Group 1, Group 2? We have a comment on Group 3. Do we have for 4, 5, 6, and 7? You can come out of the cubicle, take the microphone, say it very succinctly and straight to the point, and it will be reacted to. Anybody? Please specify the group you're reacting to.
Well, my name's Chief Don Ben Noyega from Edo State, Youth Leader PANDEF. I'm in Group 1. The question I ask, and I also will ask, continue to ask, is that one of the key elements of development is energy, which is light. And it beats my imagination that up till this moment, Nigeria is still battling to retain energy. And how can a country like this really function properly when you're talking about industrialization without energy? So one of the things I submitted, I'll say in my group is that I must only advocate that gas flaring should be converted to energy in the Niger Delta. It's very key. Because if you look at the amount of cubic gas flared every day in the Niger Delta, if you convert it to energy, I think we don't have anything to do with power holding anymore. Because in my community today, we have a gas turbine. In Utimodi today, there's a gas turbine, and they have 24-hour uninterrupted power supply. So it can also be replicated to other Niger Delta communities that are producing oil and gas. And if you convert it, bring in international oil electrical company like General Electrica, they can work in collaboration with NDDC and other parent bodies to make sure that the Niger Delta gets power. Anything you are talking about in this auditorium, if you don't have power to preserve your agricultural produce, if you don't have power to retain your industries, you have not achieved anything. Because power is the key. A situation whereby you will use how many liters of diesel, even NDDC now, if there's no power, the amount of money you use in running that office, if you convert it, you know that it's enormous money that is being spent for purchase of diesel and other petroleum products to power your generators. So we are appealing that the government should look into that energy. And the penalty, just like the Truncom man said, Chief Mike Mowbray said that the penalty paid for gas flaring is not reflecting to those that are the direct sufferers of that gas flaring. But they are paying that money to the government, they are paying that money to governors, whereas those people who are suffering this thing, they are not really benefiting from it. So we're praying that with this new hope agenda, this renewed hope, NDDC will look into those areas so that we have a better Niger Delta and better country to live in. Thank you, and may God bless.
Thank you very much. Same issue, expanded a little bit, giving new perspective. We still need more hands. Direct it either to Group 1, 2. A whole lot of discussion on energy and power has been centered on what Group 3 did. Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everybody. I have listened carefully from Group 1 to 7, and I see them making the mistakes we have been making all along. Want NDDC to provide hospital for you. You want NDDC to bring water. You want NDDC to build a house. We should be talking now about regional master infrastructure. And NDDC as an interventionist agency is supposed to put in place structures to reduce poverty and not to increase poverty. By that I mean, I'll give you some intelligence information we had when we were in INC. A particular company was to use the gas they were flaring in Bonny, and they wanted to lay underground Atlantic cables to Port Harcourt. And the idea was that if they burn those gases and transmute it into energy, they can now use that energy to power the whole of Port Harcourt and maybe up to other cities around. That's exactly what we're talking about. We should be talking about how to convert the resources we are wasting into useful resources. That's one. I'm talking precisely about the mobile project which the River State government at that time, under a particular governor, wasted. The other thing is we should be thinking about mobility within the region. That is to say, how can a man in Edo take a light aircraft and fly to Calabar? Regional cooperation. It is easier for the states to come together with intervention, capital injection from NDDC. To float an airline, not you see a Edo Airline, Rivers Airline, Akwa Ibom Airline, and so on. Regional cooperation will be key to our driving this process, and we will discover that at the end of the day, it becomes cheaper per state. Then thirdly, the area I want to intervene is economic development. We cannot go the route, or some Americans say the route, we want to go to without a sustainable funding apparatus. Because the very people you want to go to are not ready for you to develop more than them. I don't know whether you understand what I mean. People are not allowed, states are not allowed, if you look in principle, to develop at their own rates. So the laws are created in such a way that if there's a word like that in Okreka or English, it's said to colobi others and make sure you go slow. So don't not think that it is the finances of another person you will take. Why can't we regionally also accept that? Since most of these heavy oil companies are moving and divesting out of our region, let the state governments with the NDDC come together and take over these investments they are divesting from, instead of other people from other places coming to buy those investments and employing us. That way, we'll be raising a workforce that is competent technically, and we'll be having our finances expanded in such a way that we can generate funding to pay for our interests. The reason I say this is because we must look for a way not to take from NDDC always, but also to empower NDDC to make money and create wealth. And when NDDC creates wealth as an interventionist agency, they can now come together and talk to the regional people, like they have a council now of all the governors. They can say, okay, my government can bring 250. Your government can bring 750. This government can bring this. A kind of thing, and then go into the business of taking over. That is what the Yorubas did. When the whites were divesting and leaving Nigeria, UAC, African Development Company, this, that. The Yorubas now formed the Odua group of companies and took over these investments. Go to the history of the Odua investments. It's the history of colonialism and economics. We have it as a modern threat. How can we do it? We should be reasoning that. And finally, why can't we as a people look for a way to pressurize government to say, don't give NDDC 2 naira again? This idea of giving them small money and then we are shouting they have been giving big money. Give them mega money or put their money in an escrow account. Anytime they want to get involved in a mega project, they go and take money and do iconic projects. Major highways, major bridges, major this. Because with this money they are giving, by the time they finish paying salary and paying all debts, there will be nothing remaining to do bridges. So we should be insisting that TSA, if I should think anything should come out of this technical session, is the empowerment of the NDDC. Through TSA should be stopped. NDDC money should be put into an escrow account where they can access mega money for mega projects and doing iconic projects rather than them and state governments competing for little spaces. And we as a people should not just think about what we get from NDDC always, but what we can use NDDC, how we can empower NDDC to achieve and do exploits on our behalf. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. It's beyond. Can we have the final question or comment before we take the rapporteurs? Usher, there's somebody there. Please step forward, sir.
Okay. The chairman, board of directors, and the MD CEO of NDDC, all protocol duly observed. My name is Prince Dr. Ade Benson Akingboye, the representative of the Olugbo of Ugbo Kingdom, Oba Frederick Obatero Akinruton, the paramount ruler of Ugbo land. I was among those who put thought together in Group 7 to deliberate on the issue of finance and funding. While Professor Jumbo was making our presenting our findings, there was an issue that was raised by some of the participants in our group that we needed to come in and allay fear, which has to do with the proposed Niger Delta Development Bank. And from that angle, we believe that if this development finance institution, as we put it, is better, and we all support NDDC and other relevant stakeholders, I believe that development finance institution called Niger Delta Development Bank would be a financial institution that will be able to help in the area of project funding and bringing in other developmental opportunities to the region and beyond. So this idea of developing dividend spirit, that how can such a project, a vision come to realization, given all the challenges we are having in the region. And we share it that there is no place in the world where you don't have challenge. Even the UK, America, Canada, Germany, France, that we use as standard of comparison in the world, they have their own peculiar challenges. So I personally, having shared thought with our group member, I feel that this is another area where I feel that we can really lobby the government, other stakeholders, and promote it. And we spoke extensively on internationalization of this proposed financial institution. So we shouldn't see it as a normal financial institution where funds will be put, invested money will be mismanaged. This is not mismanagement. This is not NDDC, but we're trying to come up with ideas that we know that NDDC can probably be called, let me say, partner in progress, have stake in it. Not the way most of us are thinking that, oh, once it is set up, maybe it is the fund that I kept there, that some people in NDDC want to mismanage. No, it's beyond that. They are not mismanaging this fund. So these are some of the things we need to sensitize ourselves with. When we get back to our community, our various kingdom and places, let's see how we promote some of these ideas and thoughts that we have put together. So at the end of the day, we'll be able to see ourselves as partners in progress.
Thank you very much.
So these are our own...
Thank you. Well, I want to thank all of you for your comments. All the groups have been amazing. All the contributions and interventions have been fantastic. There will be a full report that will be fed into the event of Friday. But right now, let me invite James Odafefole to give us a summary of what the communique looks like in 3 minutes. James. Can James hear me?
Mr. Chairman, MD, sir, all protocols duly observed. A brief of all that has happened today. The chairman in his welcome address emphasized the need to make our region safe for development. We must come together as stakeholders to chart implementation plans for the development of the region. And there's the need, he also emphasized the need for community-based security. The chairman of the occasion, His Excellency Dr. Hope Uzodimma, represented by the Deputy Governor, emphasized the need for the continuous stakeholders' engagement and thank the NDDC for the platform provided. The Amnesty Coordinator also re-emphasized that, talked about the need for the enthronement of peace in the Niger Delta for proper development. This session also noted today at the beginning of this day that there is the need for the federal government through the Minister of Works to pay particular attention to the East-West Road. The session today emphasized the need for monies that are owed the NDDC by the federal government to be paid, and that if need be, government should borrow from elsewhere, just as they make provisions for other development in other projects across this country for the Niger Delta also. This technical session also emphasized the need for the NDDC to be paid 3.5% VAT, just as it is done in the Northeast Development Commission. At different stakeholders, technical session, I beg your pardon, the need for inclusive education was emphasized, particularly for those who are physically challenged. It was emphasized that these be included in our educational system. The MDDC MD, in his remark, reminded us of what the region has been doing, what the NDDC has been doing, and but this session today, this technical session, provides us the opportunities to review, to revisit, to rewind, to look at the things we have done before in order to rebut. Therefore, this session was for us to talk together, to talk among ourselves, to ventilate our opinions and our angers, not only at the NDDC, but also to other stakeholders, not on the pages of newspapers, not on televisions, but to ourselves, so that we can collate those grievances of ours, collate those opinions of ours, and see how we can make them better, put them into better use for the development of the region. The ND told us of what the NDDC has been doing by keying into the Mr. President Project Hope, creating a database of all Niger Delta youths. harnessing and collating the skills of the people in the areas of their interest, so that in touching the people of the Niger Delta, the NDDC will no longer be telling people, brings 2 names, submit 10 names. Rather, we'll go into the database and pick from there people for project and develop them in accordance to their areas of interest. The NDDC, in order to ensure that there is transparency, there is continuity, there is sustainability, also engage with KPMG to improve on our governance structure. And that an interim report of that KPMG report has been submitted. The NDDC, the MD also emphasized the need for the completion of legacy projects and that there is need for partnership for implementation of projects and programs. Opinions from other stakeholders talked about the 7 pillars for the new development strategy of the Niger Delta. In talking about that, there is the need to emphasize results rather than just projects and work. There's the need for the promotion of well-being of the people. There's the need to address ecological issues. Then the challenge of deindustrialization of the region was also talked about. Many of the technical groups mentioned one recurring problem, which is the issue of power. It is emphasized that there is a need to improve our electricity, harnessing of the abundant gas resources of the region into providing sustainable energy and even providing off-grid power solutions for different communities. It was also emphasized throughout this day the need to establish a regional development bank for the Niger Delta region, drawing stakeholders together with the NDDC representing the federal government, owning about 20% of that bank, the state governments owning about 20% too, and the oil and gas companies owning 20% or more, and all the stakeholders owning certain percentage in that regional development bank from which people withdraw resources for the development of the region. Finally, it has been emphasized that we should think of what to contribute to the NDDC and not just what to get. With that, we have given a run of the activities of today. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I can assure you that a lot of work will be put in by the rapporteurs. This will be expanded, made into a proper communique, and then sent into the House for the 12th of July event. So, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, some people are also asking what will happen tomorrow. Are we jumping tomorrow to do event on Friday? And I looked at Sam here, and I asked him, do you know the meaning of Ngwori? You know where there's a word called Ngwori, which means enjoyment. So if you are new in Port Harcourt, explore the flora and fauna of the city. Explore the hospitality of the city. Somebody just promised me fisherman soup. That will be my assignment tomorrow until we meet on the 12th. But right now, let me welcome Alabo Honorable Boma Iyaye Esquire, Executive Director of Finance and Admin, to do the vote of thanks.
The Chairman, NDDC, the MD, and our very, very respectable participants. Time is well spent, so I will not bore you with another long speech. I just want to thank everybody, all our participants, especially our traditional rulers, our opinions, our youths, our women, everybody who has painstakingly participated in today's activity. This is a stakeholders forum. This is a real stakeholders forum where your opinions will be taken, your thoughts will be shared, and we will arrive at a decision. Be rest assured, any decision reached here will be implemented, not only by the NDDC, but also every other stakeholder, the state governments, the other agencies that operate in the region, the Amnesty, and other groups. They will all implement the decisions that will be reached from this summit. Having said that, let me join our brother who has said that tomorrow should be a day of Ngwore. Enjoy the hospitality of Port Harcourt. Take your time, go out, go for shopping, while we expect the other dignitaries and participants for the main summit. Friday is the main summit, and it will take place at Obiwale International Conference Center along Eliozo Road, which we refer to as GUAK Road. So there will be, like it happened today, there will be buses and vehicles to move you from your hotels to that center on Friday. By 9 a.m., be seated, and we do hope that we will not be as late as we are today. We should be starting between 10 and 11, depending on when some of our dignitaries will arrive from Abuja. So be rest assured, you will have another fun-filled day on Friday. Meanwhile, we are pleading with you before you leave for your hotels. Dinner is set. It can be early dinner, but dinner is set. Have your dinner before you leave for your different hotels. Thank you, and once again, on behalf of the Central Planning Committee, I want to thank all of you for having the pains to stay with us from morning till this evening. Once again, I say thank you, and God bless you. Go back to your hotel safely and enjoy the beauty of Port Harcourt. Thank you, and God bless you.
Thank you very much. And so just a few announcements. One, we have, like he called it, dinner. Sam was calling it lunch. Something in between lunch and dinner is what's being served. Chairman and Managing Director and ED Finance and the rest of the people in front here will go this way for the lunch. The rest of us, they will take you there. The only two groups of people who are to remain in the hall, they will take care of them. The MCs and our royal fathers will be in the room. They will take care of the royal fathers. I don't know what happens to the MCs. But I'd like to thank all of you for being part of it. See you on the 12th. In between, enjoy yourselves. There are buses outside with indications to your hotel. After dinner, go out there, look at the bus that is going to your hotel, and enter it. Good night. Have a wonderful rest. God bless you.